Welcome to the Insider's Insight podcast, where we share with you the thoughts of the individuals who are working for projects that are changing the world. Welcome to the first episode of Insider's Insight. Before we begin, I think we should talk about the elephant in the room, which is what has happened to the Chuan Chuan podcast. Now, as I have alluded to in my latter episodes of the Chuan Chuan podcast, crypto has become a much greater part of my life, which is why in order to continue this podcast, I thought it would be best to pivot it so that it aligned with my interests. And therefore, I'll be able to continue this podcast. There may be an episode of the Chuan Chuan podcast every now and again, but from this episode onwards, this podcast will be known as Insider's Insight. In today's episode, we have Jeff from the ENS team. And because Jeff is one of my closest friends, I wanted him to be the first guest of this podcast. Now, you may recognize his voice because he's actually been on previous episodes of the Chuan Chuan podcast, and he's one of two co-hosts of the Island series. So yeah, just to begin, maybe you can tell our audience, Jeff, how did you start in crypto? How did you get involved with ENS? And for those who don't know what ENS is, maybe you can also tell the audience a little bit about what ENS is.
Sure. Hi, Sean. Thanks for that introduction. So how did I get into crypto? I guess it was about 5 years ago now, 2016. I'm in Taiwan right now, and I was in Taiwan back then. And I met a guy called Ram, who's one of my closest friends as well, and one of my co-founders in a previous startup. And he basically was going on about Ethereum. And he said to me, this thing that's going up. You should have a look at it. I think Ethereum was around about $4 at the time. And he basically said, oh, this thing's like Bitcoin, but a computer. But I didn't really know what Bitcoin was. So I was just like, what does that even mean? And, that was kind of like the start, basically. From then I bought a little bit and kind of got into the community. And, I think that year in 2016, I went to DevCon 2 in Shanghai. So like that was kind of like the start. So from there, I just kind of moved on to, developing in the space. I started doing a few side projects here and there. And I think in 2017, that's when I joined ENS. At the time, it wasn't even really a company. It was just an offshoot of the Ethereum Foundation. So Nick Johnson founded the Ethereum name service. And at the time, he was working on Geth, which is one of the clients that runs Ethereum. And ENS was just a side project for him. So what happened was he wanted to effectively create a way to maybe I should just talk a little bit about what ENS is first, and then it'll make more sense, like the introduction to ENS. So the Ethereum name service basically has three main use cases. The first one is basically making cryptocurrency payments easier by resolving a name to a cryptocurrency address. So that would be something like jefflau.eth to 0x123. The second is decentralized websites, which is effectively like jefflau.eth to a website. And the last is the Web3 username use case, which is kind of like similar to like Facebook login, but for ENS. So our use case is kind of our product is basically trying to make things easier for people to use the blockchain. If you look at our logo is basically taking the hard edges off Ethereum.
Okay. I see. Interesting. And so continue. How did you get involved with ENS?
2017, that's when we released the auction registrar, which on May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day.
Was that intentional?
It was intentional, yeah. We originally wanted it on Pi Day, which was a couple months before, but we actually had a hiccup with the kind of release. So, and actually I wasn't on the team at the time. I was like looking from afar. They delayed it a couple of months and made it Star Wars Day instead.
I see.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how did you get started? When are you?
Yeah, so in 2017, they released a bunch of names on the auction registrar, which is basically an auction to allow people to bid. No one actually needed to spend any money. It was just a deposit to stop people from bidding on any name at all. You could take your ETH back afterwards if you wanted to release the name. And then that's when I got involved. Basically, they needed someone to do the manager, the app for ENS, so you could like manage your name and change records, that kind of thing. And that's kind of how I got involved. So they put out Nick put out a Ethlance proposal, which is, at the time, it was just it was literally entirely on chain. It was kind of like an Odesk or like one of those platforms where you look for freelancers, but it was entirely on Ethereum. So you have to do all your like profile details on Ethereum. You had to do all the proposals and payments on Ethereum. So like, I think this kind of app would not be suitable right now because literally everything was on chain, including, even my profile data. But that was what we used at the time. And that's how I found the job. One of my friends recommended me, one of my colleagues now, Makito, and that's kind of how I got into the gig, and I started building the manager. And this took me like maybe 2 or 3 months. It was just kind of a freelance job. I didn't know it was going to turn into anything. But then in 2018, the ENS project got funding from the Ethereum Foundation as a grant to kind of take it from a side project to like an actual thing. And in 2018, we actually formed True Names Limited, which is the non-profit company behind the Ethereum name service. And the team, I think we got a $1 million grant. So we hired 6 or 7 full-time people, including myself. And that's kind of the start of, I guess, ENS as a proper entity as opposed to like a side project.
Wow, that's super cool. Now, today's podcast is actually going to be on thinking in bets, which is something that you have executed in your life to great success, wouldn't you say, Jeff? Maybe you can give a bit of an introduction on why you think it's important for people to start doing it, especially young people, because I feel that growing up in the traditional education system, you don't really learn how to take risks. And I think you managed to get a grasp of that concept very early on. Maybe you can just give a bit of a introduction on why you think it's important.
Yeah, so Thinking in Bets is it's actually a book by Annie Duke. I haven't actually read the whole book, but the concepts of Thinking in Bets is something that's kind of close to
that book is she played blackjack, right?
No, she's a poker player.
Oh yeah, but she learned it. She's like a professor, and then she learned it. She learned how to. I think she literally learned it to write this book, right? I think I heard her in a podcast.
Annie Duke is a professional poker player, so I think she wrote the book. I mean, I don't know if she played blackjack or not, but in the book she talks mainly about poker.
Yeah, I think I saw her in a podcast with We Study Billionaires. We Study Billionaires. Yeah. Or she was on Freakonomics. But I think I've heard her story. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too sure about her story, but I think the concepts of the book are interesting because I think, like, without reading the book, it's something that I've applied to my life since my early 20s. Basically, I started playing poker when I was like 18. One of our close friends, Juan, introduced me to poker back then, and I think it's allowed me to kind of take opportunities that I maybe not normally would. And not just that, but like deal with failure in a way that not everyone can. And I don't think it's a very like complicated concept. The idea of thinking in bets is that everything in your life, every decision you make is a bet. And what that means is that there is a chance you can succeed and there's a chance you can fail. And even though that sounds silly almost to say it's like so obvious, obviously there's a chance you can succeed, it's not a chance you can fail. But I think a lot of, I mean, even kids, right? Like they have expectations, and the expectation is to 100% to win. So when they lose, it becomes a significant, like, down on their lives. They can't deal with that failure. Or on the other side, you expect 100% to fail, which kind of just means that like you just don't try. You don't put your effort in. You don't realize that actually like it may seem like you're gonna lose, but you might have had a 10-20% chance to win, and that could have been enough in that situation. The luck of the draw may have allowed you to succeed. And when you realize that everything is a bet and there is a chance you can win and there is a chance you can lose, you can deal with failure a lot more easier. Like, even though you know that you may fail in this particular situation, like if you try enough times, probability will probably let you win at some point. And that's kind of how you can apply that to your life and not allow these failures to kind of take hold of you and hold you back for too long.
Why did you decide to play poker at that time? What kind of drove you over the edge to actually even begin?
I think it wasn't really anything particularly special. It was just like, this game is kind of fun. It's a way to kind of make a little bit of cash. And I think it was very interesting because, I mean, poker is just like this kind of mix of like, technical ability, which is like, learn like the probabilities and the cards and strategies. But at the same time, you also need to like play your opponent, right? It's not a game where you have perfect information. It is a game of imperfect information. So I think those kind of games are quite fun to play because, you get competitive, you can play against other people. And I think that part appealed to me, that can, that it's almost like a sport in a way.
Do you think that you have a natural inclination to, be drawn to these kind of games? Or do you think that you developed it as you grew older?
I think all of this kind of stems from maybe playing games when I was a kid. Like, I played a lot of competitive games when I was like, I wouldn't say I was like good as in like an esports player. I mean, I don't think there really was that many esports players at the time, but I always loved playing like games that were, you could do PvP and, games that like Counter-Strike or, real-time strategies where, you could kind of test your mettle against other people and can compete. And I think like, for me, life has always been about improvement and, learning and improving. And I think one of the ways you can do that is to, throw yourself into the ring and just see how you do. And so I think that's been a kind of a recurring theme in my life to be able to compete in a way.
That's really interesting. You talk about these video games. Let's take Counter-Strike, for example, or these MMORPGs. Do you feel that there's more, because poker has it's an imperfect game, right? It's skill and there's luck. Now with these other video games, do you also feel like there was also an element of skill and luck? Or do you think that the skill basically trumps the luck? And that, how similar do you think those games were to poker? Because I feel like when money gets involved, there's a certain fear about playing it because you could lose it. Whereas if you play these games, there's nothing to really lose. I guess your pride, but that's about it.
No, yeah, I can see what you're alluding to. So I think you're right. I think the reason why I started to compete in these games is because when you have more to lose, which is like, if it's like a friendly game with your friends, you don't really have anything to lose. It's kind of like everything's fun and games. But if you compete with, other clans, other guilds, other people that you don't know on the stage, it's kind of like poker in the sense that, you're betting your reputation and like you're betting your pride, that kind of thing. And there is more to lose. And I would say it's not quite the same. Like when you put your money where your mouth is, as we've seen with like crypto and stuff like that, it's obviously very different. Like people really, really care about the outcome. And that brings, like, it just makes everyone better in a way. Like if you've got something on the line. And I do believe that having something on the line is important to growing and to taking risks.
Do you think that a lot of young people can make that should make that transition from playing video games to then playing poker and then or even investing? Like, do you think that's a very natural transition one can make? Because a lot of the young generation, they are really into games. And I wonder if it could be a very strong positive for them because, there's a lot of negative media around playing games right now.
I think they don't necessarily need to play poker. I think it's just the concepts around taking risks that I learned from poker that really helped. But like you said, like, I guess investing would be like a similar thing. I think being able to be in an environment where you can like take risks and put your money where your mouth is and learn from those mistakes and kind of learn to like, I think one of the things I learned like from poker, it wasn't just about taking risks, right? Those little things like, bankroll management, all these kind of things. I think bankroll management was super important for me because I think that's what a lot of people don't like. When you take a bet, it's not just about just throwing money at this particular situation. You need to understand your own situation, which is like, okay, well, I mean, in poker, we have this rule, which is like the 2% rule. You don't put more than 2% of your bankroll into any game. And I mean, in investment, like it's kind of similar, right? You're taking like a 1 out of 50 of your portfolio to like put into this particular thing. And so if you lose, you don't lose your entire bankroll. And obviously, if you're playing in percentages, 2% will keep going all the way down. Your buy-in will be less and less and less and less. But the idea in poker is that, you only move up the stakes when you have enough to play that stakes. You can't play in a, $1, $2 game when you've only got $50. Like, you don't even have enough for one game. And I think that is something that allowed me to do well just in life, where you don't put too much into any particular game, and you're strict with that. Even though like you're in poker, we have this idea called tilting, which basically means you're not playing at your best, and you're maybe angry from a loss or something that's happened in a previous hand. And when you're tilting, you're not really thinking straight, and you may put more than you should be losing in one game. Like, you might take all your money and put it on one bet. And that's what I kind of learned not to do, because whether it's in crypto or in poker or investment, it's not really a game of like pure skill. It's a game of, at the top, basically it's a game of survival. If you can survive long enough, you win. If you stay in the market, you win. If you bust out, that's it. It's over. Like, getting that initial investment back is the hardest thing to do.
I think you mentioned previously you wanted to talk about that, the concept of expected value, EV. Maybe you can share to our audience what EV is and how that's, influenced the way you think or the way you go through life.
Sure, yeah. So like EV is also something I learned from poker. I think it does exist elsewhere, but the idea is basically that when you make a decision, it's either positive EV, negative EV, or it's just kind of neutral. And I can give you a quick example from poker, but the basic idea is if you are let's say like if you're in a hand pre-flop, which means like right at the beginning, I've got 2 cards, you've got 2 cards, and I've got aces and you've got ace king. And basically in this particular situation, I'm completely dominating you, and I'm like something like 90% to win. If we put all our money in before, I'm like 90% to win, which basically means it's positive EV for me to go into this hand, like pretty much every single time. And this is easy to understand because I've got such a big hand, but you can also have positive EV when you have a hand that is losing. So for instance, I'm not sure how much your audience knows about poker, so we'll just kind of like make it quite easy. But if I have a hand that is losing, like I need one more card to make a straight or one more card to make a flush, that kind of thing. And then you have aces. So basically I'm not winning, but I only have to put a little bit more into the pot to kind of match you and see the last card. Even if I've only got 20% to win, if I only have to put 10% more money into the pot, this is a positive EV bet. It basically means that every single time I should be putting this money in, because over a long enough time period, like we talked about with survival, over a long enough time period, I should win enough of these to make my money back, because I'm putting in 10% for a 20% chance to win. And I think this general idea can be played across your life. like if you only have to invest a little bit of time, like maybe you're just going to go to an interview or something like that and you really feel like you're not going to make it, but like you still have a 20% chance to get it or 10% chance to get it, and you need to put like a little bit of time in. I think those kind of opportunities are very positive EV. And all you need to be able to do is take the loss. Like know that you're probably going to lose 90% of the time. But that 10% chance that you're going to win, or 10% chance when you do win, like probabilistically you will win at some point, you'll be okay and you'll make it and you'll make the next step. But you just need to be able to take all the crap in between where, you know, you feel rubbish because you're constantly being rejected, you're constantly losing.
Yeah, I mean, so firstly, EV is actually a concept taught in finance, because when you're valuing projects or stocks or all of these stuff, you're basically, you're calculating the expected value that you can make or that it's worth. And that's how you come up with all of these models. So there's a lot of similarities between finance and playing poker. But I think something interesting you said was thinking about your life in probabilities and in payoffs. And it's quite difficult to do that, to be honest. Maybe you can think of an example of like a big decision you've made where you've actually thought about the probability and about the payoffs, and then you've managed to come up with an EV calculation. Maybe you could come up with an example that's not so obvious. Like, it's obvious when there's numbers involved, like poker, there's obvious probabilities, or finance, but maybe other decisions where it's not so obvious and you've actually tried to utilize that concept in your everyday life.
Let me think. I mean, there's definitely a few cases in my life where I've made decisions that have really paid off, and it would be easy for me to say at the time that like, oh, I didn't know what was going on, but now it paid off. Like, for instance, actually one of the things that really I obviously got into Ethereum and crypto because of my friend Ram, but actually the way I met one of the other people that really made an effect on my life, Makoto, the way I actually ended up meeting him was through a Medium article he had posted about Ethereum. And all I did was I commented on it, and he replied to me, and me and him were learning Ethereum around the same time. And actually, that was one of the reasons why I ended up working at ENS, because I met him then. At the time, he was working full time at a blockchain insurance company. Oh, actually, sorry, it wasn't even a blockchain insurance. It was just an insurance company in the UK. And he knew Nick, like from Ethereum meetups. And Nick was obviously looking for a front-end developer to do this manager app at the time, but he obviously couldn't do it because he was working full time, whereas I was like working in part-time teaching JavaScript, and so I had time on my hands. So he actually recommended to me. So I think at the time it was like, okay, well, there's no way I would have known like, oh, commenting on this article would make me meet one of my future co-founders and my future colleagues at ENS, and also giving me this opportunity for ENS. But I think a lot of the time, I think just taking those little moments where like, you know, I could have chosen not to kind of interact and, be active in my community. And I think I would have been a lot worse off. And I think a lot of those bets are all really positive EV. Like, you put in a tiny, tiny bit of time to plant a seed. And I mean, I think there's a lot to do with like networking, and I'm not a very good networker, but like I have seemingly taken some very positive EV bets where like I put in a tiny, tiny bit of time, and that relationship has grown into something that has, you know, compounded year on year into like a friendship or a working relationship that has gone to benefit me, you know, 100,000 times fold or something ridiculous, right? And obviously there's no money involved here, so you don't think about this as a positive or negative EV bet, but it's compounded so much that like, you know, I can't imagine, like it snowballs so much. I really imagine if I can keep on going backwards, right? Like, and just thinking, oh, if I hadn't making that decision, I wouldn't be in crypto, or I wouldn't be in programming to get into crypto, or I wouldn't have been into, you know, X, Y, Z. And so I don't know if that's a practical example, because it's more like how something has snowballed into like an avalanche, as opposed to like a very practical EV calculation.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you've basically just described is it's better to do something that has such a low effort threshold than to not do it. I mean, with that Medium post, you could have not posted, but it was like such a little bit of an effort from you to do it. And because you did put a comment out there, it's just basically changed the course of your life. And that's been something that people should basically do. I have another question, and then maybe we can move on to the next part of the podcast, which is I wanted to know your opinion about conviction. Now, earlier this year, I made a massive decision to basically put in all of my liquid wealth into crypto, just because I knew that through my number of years of, researching and working and just trying to figure out what made sense, that to not be all in on crypto was dangerous, at least for me. And so, I mean, that was very high conviction, and luckily it has paid off. Where does conviction come into your mind frame, your framework of thinking?
Yeah, so I would say that, like, going back to the whole bankroll management thing, like, generally that's kind of how I start. I dip my toes in. I put in 2% here, 1% here, whether it's time or money, that kind of thing. But I think when you get to a point where you believe in something, or you feel like this thing is something that is, even if you made no money from it, you'd be happy doing it. That is where I make my high conviction bets. Like, I think people talk about it as like a kind of like a barbell strategy, that kind of thing. And where you have a very heavy conviction in, like, maybe, a couple of like strong or stable bets. And I felt like, crypto and the Ethereum community, like, that those are my pillars, and having high conviction and kind of throwing away the 1 or 2% rules and just kind of going pretty heavy into those. I think that served me well, in my life in general. And it does throw caution to the wind on, like, bankroll management, but at the same time, you are still bankroll managing, like, your high risk bets, like things that you don't know if they're going to pay off, but if they do, they might go 100x or 1000x.
How do you decide to have high conviction? You just what factors come to play when you make that decision?
I think for me, I'm kind of a nerd. So once I get into something, I research the hell out of it. I go into the details, whether that's like technical details or like the community, or like, so for instance, if it was like Ethereum or something like that, at the time it was like, wow, this is doing something like that no other blockchain at the time is doing, smart contracts on a blockchain. We've got all these really, really smart people in a room building this tech. Nothing else is doing anything like it. I don't know if there's any factors specifically that made me have a high conviction bet, say specifically in Ethereum, but it was kind of like, if you keep going and you do your deep research, and after that you don't feel like appalled by any of it, I think I would make probably a larger bet in that space. And then I'm like a terrible trader, right? So I wouldn't take any of my trading advice, but what I generally do is I end up longing my longs. So if something seems to be even better, like, I'll start to get even heavier into it. And that's kind of how I end up doing things until, like, I either have no more money to invest or I've got no more time to invest. and I think that just kind of compounds, right? Like, I don't go in 100% right at the beginning, but I do my deep research. I put in, 10% of my time or 10% of my money. And as it starts to grow and as it starts to snowball, I actually go heavier into it, not lighter into it. And so I think, like, the idea of compounding really, really makes sense to me.
Perfect. So just to finish off, we've got a couple of questions from the community. The first question is, as one of the largest airdrops in history, how did you come up with the decision on how to form the way you're going to airdrop the DAO? It's clear that a lot of work went into that decision. Okay.
Should I maybe go into a little bit more about ENS? I feel like there's a gap in between. Would your listeners know specifically about ENS, or?
Yeah. Go briefly talk about the idea behind. More. Just elaborate a bit more to the introduction. That would be fine.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I mentioned in the introduction there was these kind of like three main parts of ENS, which is easy cryptocurrency payments and then decentralized websites and the Web3 username. And I think the idea of ENS now is to, like I said, to like soften these hard edges of Ethereum. Like Ethereum is this kind of very cryptographic heavy, lots of hashes, lots of like things that if you're not familiar with crypto, it's going to be kind of scary to look at. And we just want to be something that creates a very smooth user experience for the blockchain community. And it's not just within Ethereum. Like at the beginning, it was kind of this idea of like softening Ethereum, but now we're like, okay, well, everyone needs this kind of naming solution. We need this solution to kind of soften the edges of crypto in general, blockchain in general. So that's kind of where we're going with it now. I can actually elaborate on the third use case, which is the Web3 username. The idea is basically you can take your cryptocurrency address and you can have a thing called a primary ENS username, which is basically, let's say it's yishuan.eth. And it basically can go from your address, which is when you sign in with like MetaMask, that kind of thing. It can go and find your name, and then it will show that name instead of your address. So instead of it being like I'm paying to yishuan.eth, it's basically like, oh, I'm signing into Uniswap, and the address will turn into yishuan.eth. So you just see yishuan.eth there instead. And so it's kind of like a nicer user experience. And you can see this quite a lot in Etherscan. So if people have their primary ENS username set up, you'll see these ENS names instead of the Ethereum address. And we can go even further with that, which is basically, well, every ENS name can also resolve records. So this is kind of like how DNS works as well, right? You just have like a name and you have a bunch of records, and those the main records for DNS is just an IP address. And for us, obviously, it's like Ethereum addresses, but you can also have arbitrary text records, which can basically just any arbitrary piece of information. And so one of the ones that we standardized recently is the avatar record. And that basically allows you to put like a picture, one of your NFTs, or some JPEG into your ENS name. And from your address, if you can see, you can resolve your ENS name from your cryptocurrency address. And then from your ENS name, I can resolve your avatar. So from your address, I can go yishuan.eth and then this avatar of a jellyfish or something like that. And then I can take that jellyfish and I can put that, like say, on your Uniswap profile or something like that. And so this idea of building profiles, your Web3 username profile on top of ENS is something that we're really, really interested in right now. It basically allows you to like take your cryptocurrency address and take your profile with you anywhere, basically. So whether it's on Uniswap, on Sushi, or, in the future, like social networks on top of Ethereum, that kind of thing. And so I think like the vision now of ENS is to kind of go down this path of decentralized identity and allow us to, give people, a way of, kind of taking control of their data in a way. And so with that vision in mind, we basically we as a protocol, as a piece of infrastructure of the blockchain community, we don't want to be entirely in control of that. So we would just be another system that is controlled by a private company, and like the community wouldn't have no say over it. And we view ourselves as a piece of Web3 infrastructure, like the roads of blockchain in a way. And so we felt that us being entirely in control of this thing wasn't the right way to do things, which is how we kind of got to the DAO. And so the idea with DAO and the token is basically we're essentially exiting to the community in a way. So the allocation was about 25% to the team, 25% for the airdrop, and then 50% to the DAO. So basically the community has around 75% of the protocol. And with the token basically governs the DAO, and the DAO, with the proposals that are going in, actually, I think yesterday, it depends on how the vote goes, they'll have control over all the contracts on ENS, which would mean that they can have control over the funds. They'll also be able to like change the contract. So if True Names Limited, the non-profit, wants to say make a protocol upgrade, it actually needs to ask the DAO for permission. Like, here's the code for this. Does this make sense to do? And the community has control over it in a way. Sorry, that was a brief introduction on ENS and DAO. So what was the question again? Maybe I can answer that now.
So what factors came into the decision of, how you were going to allocate the airdrop?
Right. Yeah. So essentially, I think we've taken a leaf out of like Gitcoin's book, and I think it wasn't like super scientific, but the idea was we wanted the community to have more of this protocol than us. We don't have any VCs. We don't really have any investors. We've only been funded by like 1 or 2 grants from mainly the Ethereum Foundation. I think we got a grant from Chainlink, a small amount as well. So we don't have any investors, and so the idea for the allocation was mainly, of course, I think very simply it was kind of like 50% for the past, 50% for the future. So like the future is the DAO, and that hasn't been allocated yet. Essentially, it's in the DAO, and for the past we kind of split that 50-50 again. So 50% for the core contributors, not just like the team, but just there's also external contributors. I think there's over 100 of them, including like different applications, that kind of thing, that also integrate ENS in the early days. And then 50% for people that used ENS. So that was mainly the airdrop, which was about 25 million tokens to 137,000 accounts across Ethereum.
I really like that concept. 50% for the past and 50% for the future. It's very zen.
Yeah.
Last question. What's your family members' interaction with crypto? What was their reaction when you got into it?
I mean, I don't think they really knew what I was doing. I think the first family member I got into crypto was my brother. And I actually told him about Ethereum like when it was about $20 or $40 or something like that. And we were hiking in Hong Kong, and I was telling him about this thing. I didn't really know how to talk about it. I was just talking about how like it's decentralized in the future, and it's like it's going to change the world. And I think he thought I was a bit crazy. Until I gifted him 1 ETH for his like birthday. I think it was like $40 or something like that. And he just kind of saw the kind of meteoric rise of the coin. And I mean, now he's like more into crypto than I am. Like, he doesn't work in crypto, but he's just like very into the research and that kind of thing. And I would say like, that's like probably the only success story within my family. But, I think my parents still don't know, really what it is. They're just kind of like, oh, I can see the Bitcoin price in the Financial Times now,
Well, thank you so much for being our first guest. It's been a great episode, and wish you all the luck for your future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
See you guys. Bye-bye.